Yep, super. Yeah, yeah. By Kenya? No, we do more. They are bigger, but mainly outside Europe. Yeah, yeah. So we will do all the things that our needs. Yeah. So one, okay, so for sure, for sure. Good to see you again. So what you see with us is we like that, but we like to first of all you own us. Kenya will be a shareholder. We work with you, not the Europeans. We work. We will do big projects, but we also do small projects. So we can do like 4 or 5 million small projects, and we do a lot of
Dear colleagues, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We'll start soon. Once again, good morning. I'm Alparslan Bayraktar, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources of Turkey, and I would like to start by thanking the President of the Assembly for inviting me to preside over this session. I now invite the Assembly to turn to Agenda Item 10, High-Level Dialogue on Tripling Impact in Small Island Developing States, Accelerating Renewables, Climate Resilience, and Sustainable Development. The Assembly has before it a background document with the same title contained in A15BN/5. This high-level dialogue will focus on the energy transition priorities of SIDS as outlined in the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS, as well as at the other energy and climate fora, including insights provided at the 27th Council meeting and COP29. It will focus on resources and strategies needed to scale up renewables-driven energy transition in SIDS, aligned with the tripling renewables goal to strengthen climate resilience, sustainability, and achieve energy security and reliability in the coming decade. SIDS face important challenges, and renewables have a very crucial potential for their energy transition efforts. Many SIDS have very ambitious targets regarding renewables, and accessibility of new technologies and finance are key issues for this transformation. According to the work of IRENA, only 8.7 gigawatts of total renewable energy installed capacity was installed by the end of 2023. Having said this, I would like to invite the Deputy Director General for his introductory remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the high-level dialogue on tripling impact in the small island developing states. This event takes place at a critical juncture following the SIDS focus discussions at the 28th IRENA Council meeting and COP29, where the urgent call for decisive energy transition and climate action was reaffirmed. If we look at what's happening in the world and how it is impacting SIDS countries, we will see that there is a lot of impact that the climate change events are having on the SIDS. For this reason, I would like to begin by extending IRENA's heartfelt support and prayers for those affected by the recent natural disasters in the SIDS, including the earthquake at Vanuatu, hurricanes in Cuba, and severe storms in Grenada. These events highlight the urgent need for strong disaster recovery and climate resilience, reminding us of the hardship faced by the SIDS communities and the critical importance of collective action to drive transformative solutions. Today, we turn our focus to the essential resources, capacities, and strategies needed to scale up the renewables-driven energy transition in SIDS. Aligned with the global goal of tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030. This is really not just an aspiration for SIDS. It is a non-negotiable need that is imperative for their survival, resilience, and prosperity. The distinctive challenges of small economies, geographic isolation, limited natural resources, and heightened climate vulnerabilities required forward-thinking and tailored solutions. Recurring and intensifying climate-related disasters continue to disproportionately impact SIDS, with annual adaptation costs soaring to $26 billion, which is nearly 5% of the collective GDP. Over the past 5 decades, these challenges have led to cumulative losses exceeding $153 billion, pushing over 40% of the SIDS into debt distress. The continued reliance on expensive imported fuel and food compounds these issues, placing further strain on the economies. In response to these realities, a transformative shift in financial capacity and technical support is critical. Recognizing that there is a very critical role that energy plays in fostering sustainable development and climate action, global frameworks such as the recently adopted Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS have consistently prioritized renewable energy, clean and innovative solutions as key to strengthening resilience. In unison with the Abbas agenda, IRENA remains unwavering in its support to the SIDS as we progress towards the third cycle of their NDCs. Since 2014, the agency has been working with 40 SIDS, facilitating 331 technical assistance activities, including data collection, roadmap development, capacity building, and project facilitation. Among IRENA's impactful support is the development of renewable energy project concepts for 5 rural villages in Vanuatu, which is expected to improve energy access, provide socio-economic benefits, particularly for women and girls in rural areas. It also assisted Dominica's geothermal initiatives by assessing project bankability and organizing project finance workshops to boost investment. Additionally, IRENA conducts country-specific assessments, and we have done that in Papua New Guinea's energy transition assessment, Fiji's legislative gap analysis to promote private investment, and an assessment in South Tome and Principe highlighting renewable energy's impact in improving healthcare and delivery. Through SIDS Lighthouses initiative, IRENA advances regional cooperation and accountability by developing progress indicators aligned with the Abbas monitoring and evaluation framework. These indicators have been piloted in Antigua and Barbuda, Seychelles and Tonga, with plans for implementation across all SIDS countries. This approach is critical given the pressing need to transform the energy mix in the SIDS, which is heavily skewed towards fossil fuels. To accelerate this transition, the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative set an ambitious target of 10 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. With just over 1 gigawatt remaining to reach this target, SIDS are expected to surpass this, underscoring the strong ambition, action, and resilience of the SIDS to triple renewable energy impact. So looking ahead, I propose that in close consultation with our partners, the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative considers the possibility of setting a more ambitious target of 20 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2035, which would be 3 times the initial NDC target of 6.8 gigawatts set by the SIDS in the first round of the NDC. Achieving this goal will require naturally innovative financing solutions and leveraging global partnerships to unlock the full potential of the renewable energy to drive SIDS economies and sustainable development within them. So today, I'd like to call on IRENA's membership, the private sector, development partners, international organizations, and civil society to join forces in the collective action and effort that's required to triple renewable energy capacity in the SIDS. And I'm sure together we can turn this challenge that we see before us into an opportunity for ensuring a sustainable and resilient future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Director General, for your remarks. And I now invite the Assembly to turn the screen where a short but very powerful video that sets the stage for today's dialogue will be displayed. The video highlights the critical urgency for small island developing states to accelerate their energy transitions, addressing climate risks, economic vulnerabilities, and dependence on fossil fuels. Let us take a moment to reflect on the solutions and opportunities we can seize to create lasting impacts in those states.
The oceans, communities, and economies of the small island developing states, or SIDS, are imperiled by unprecedented risks. With climate change, their lifeline hangs on a thread. Food and fuel imports eat up 40% of their income, while climate hazards cost them $153 billion over 50 years, leaving many SIDS in high debt distress, and making the goal to triple renewable power capacity by 2030 hard to reach. For SIDS, the energy transition is non-negotiable. It is a necessity to thrive and survive.
Samoa Island development states continue to face major constraints to sustainable development and economic growth.
They urgently require strengthened capacity and financial support. Launched in 2014, the SIDS Lighthouses Initiative unites SIDS and partners to transform their energy landscape, driving socioeconomic benefits for all. With the right partnerships and increased investment, it can become a reality.
If we don't contain global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, this planet ain't gonna be worth living in.
Thank you for such a compelling and insightful video. During this session, we will hear insights from a high-level panel of speakers on the subject matter. The discussions will be moderated by Mr. Tomasi Blair, Deputy Permanent Representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations, and Mr. Gürbüz Gönül, Director, Country Engagement and Partnerships in IRENA. The panel discussion will be followed by member interventions, and let me now hand over to our moderator. Over to you, Mr. Blair.
Chair, can you hear me? Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to you, Director General. It is my privilege to moderate the first panel discussion of this high-level dialogue, Financing Energy Transition, Climate Resilience, and Inclusive Solutions. As we dive into the critical topic of financing energy transitions, climate resilience, and inclusive solutions for SIDS, this conversation comes at a pivotal moment, aligning with the key outcomes of the 4th International Conference on SIDS that was recently held in Antigua and Barbuda. This highlighted the urgent need for tailored financial support in a number of areas. These priorities can be found in the new SIDS Program of Action, the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS. We coined this the ABAS. And they include 4 critical areas. 1, enhancing support, investment, and partnerships. 2, addressing barriers to access and mobilizing finance for renewable energy. 3, developing SIDS-specific technologies and applications for renewable energy. And 4, supporting the removal of structural barriers. To bring this topic into perspective, we have assembled quite a diverse panel of policymakers from government and institutions. I now invite our panelists to join me on the stage. First, we have His Excellency, Mr. Tariq Ibrahim, Minister of Climate Change, Environment and Energy of the Maldives. We then have the Honorable Lisa Cummins, Minister of Energy and Business of Barbados. We have the Honorable Ro Philip Tarawasu, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, the Minister of Public Works and Meteorological Services of Fiji. We then have Mr. Demetrios Papanathiou, Energy Global Director from the World Bank. And I hope I didn't butcher your name, sir. We have the Honorable Vince Henderson, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Commonwealth of Dominica. We have Dr. Dong Ik Lee, Senior Advisor to the President of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And then finally, we have the Honorable Thomas Opa, Minister of Energy of Papua New Guinea. And so we have limited time, and so I want to dive right into this afternoon's discussion. And so I encourage the panel members to be less scripted, and so we have more of a conversation on the needs and priorities of SIDS. And so I'll start with Your Excellency, Mr. Ibrahim of Maldives. So Maldives have demonstrated remarkable leadership in advancing renewable energy through initiatives like Aspire and Arise and the Sustainable Renewables Risk Mitigation Initiative, which from all accounts have successfully attracted private sector investments and diversified the energy portfolio of the Maldives. Sir, these are the type of best case scenarios that we need to demonstrate within SIDS. And so could you elaborate on the key lessons learned from these initiatives in creating investor confidence? And I think of interest to all of us, how will Maldives scale up using financing mechanisms to accelerate your transition to renewable energy?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that this is a very important topic for the small island development set. How do you increase and scale up the renewable energy on SIDS? In Maldives, why we did that, why we are increasing the renewable energy is one of the main thing that why we are increasing the renewable energies. We spend about 13.5% of our GDP on fossil fuel imports. That's a huge number that we are spending on fossil fuel imports. And additionally, we are spending about $150 million per year on electricity subsidies. Actually, this is not sustainable and neither physically nor environmentally sustainable. So we were finding on how we can increase this share of renewable energy so that we can use that 13.5% of our GDP to have other development required to spend on our other development needs. So we turned, apart from the public sector investments, we turned to private partnerships to accelerate renewable energy. To do that, we actually initially started having policies that that are friendly for the private sector investment. One of the things is that with the help of the multilateral partners, multilateral banks, we were able to develop programs where we have partial payment guarantee mechanisms for the projects the private sector uh, have private sector involvement in the renewable energy. Also, we have programs where the currency convertibility is supported to the private sector, where they get, when they get paid our local currency, they can actually convert it to the US dollars or whatever currency they want, so that they can get it back to their country or the company. And then we are also providing land to have renewable energy at a very low concessional rates, so that they can have renewable energy infrastructure on those land. And lastly, we have duty exemption on all renewable energy products that or products that they import to the Maldives. So by doing this, we were able to invite and get private sector involvement in this in the renewable energy arena. So we started when we started our big projects on renewable energy. We went on the PPA rates at that time was around 21 cents per kilowatt hour. That is in 2017, 2018. And when we look at now with all these initiatives and with the guarantee mechanisms, we were able to bring down the cost of PPAs to about 9.88 cents per kilowatt hour. And we are also now embarking on, since small island development states and Maldives, we don't have land to have bigger renewable energy solar panels on land. We are now embarking on to have floating solar PV systems. And we have started with the project that is about 110 megawatts of floating solar PV. That's also through private sector investment. So we hope that in the future, very soon, hopefully by the end of next year, we will have one of the largest floating solar PV systems on the SIDS and offshore will be operational by next year, end of next year. So we are doing this type of work to make sure that the private sector involvement is there. One last thing I would like to state is that our President, Dr. Mohamed Moise, when he assumed office, and at COP28, he announced that 33% of our electricity to be generated from renewable energy. So within this 1 year after he announced, we were able to actually install 17 megawatts of renewable energy or solar PV in the country. So from 53 megawatts in 2028, and now, right now as we speak, it's 70 megawatts. So I think the right policies is something that is very, very much needed to make sure that the private sector investment is, and so it should start from the very top, and then it should from the government itself. And then if we have the right policies, I'm sure not only Maldives, all the small island states can actually have these kind of projects with the private sector involvement. So I think it is a must that not only the public sector involvement in the renewable energy, but private sector to be involved, so that we can have access to renewable energy at a fast pace, and we will be able to have tripling of renewable energy by 2020, 30 with this kind of policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Quite an innovative approach that the Maldives is taken in partnership with the private sector in ensuring that you reach your renewable energy ambition. I think key to this discussion, and this goes into the conversation that I do want to have with Her Excellency Lisa Cummins is how we bring the multilateral institutions on board. And we know that the Bridgetown Initiative has been making its rounds for a number of years now. It is quite an innovative approach that Prime Minister Motley and the government of Barbados is spearheading in trying to ensure that we not only reform the international financial architecture, but we allow access of the type of financing that is needed for, in particular, vulnerable countries like SIDS, in our renewable energy ambitions. We know that the international financial architecture is broken, it is outdated, and its current state does not adequately address the needs of vulnerable countries like SIDS. Could you elaborate on how the Bridgetown Initiative seeks to tackle these challenges, and how can such reforms directly support SIDS in overcoming the barriers to accessing affordable financing for energy transition and resilience building efforts?
Thank you very much for the question. I want to put the question in context, perhaps, and then answer the question, yeah? So Barbados, for example, in 2023, and I've spoken about this before in 2024, we used around close to $1 billion to import fossil fuels for our energy needs. That's not an insignificant amount. So you park that as point number one. And then you consider that in 2008, somewhere thereabouts, Barbados discovered that we had a potential for offshore oil and gas. We had 26 offshore oil and gas blocks, and we've not developed them. And I'm certain that you have heard Prime Minister Motley, certainly in Egypt and COP, point out that Barbados was not willing, as a climate champion and as the Bridgetown Initiative champion, to begin the process of offshore drilling for oil and gas. And so Barbados not only is importing expensive fossil fuels, but it is foregoing the revenue from offshore oil and gas in favor of an ambitious 2030, 2035 target for net zero and from 100% renewables. And that is the financing that is going to be required for us to make that renewable energy transition make sense for our people. That's not a unique challenge for Barbados, especially given that we are a country sitting in the Caribbean basin, where Guyana, for example, has just gone into its offshore oil and gas exploration round. Suriname has done the same, but they're also balancing that up against their renewable energy transition needs. All of the SIDS in the region, and my colleague Vince here and others who are in the room, are also balancing the ability to finance their offshore or their renewable energy targets while simultaneously financing them with the other development needs that they had. So this is where the Bridgetown Initiative comes in. It is important for Barbados to be able, and all small island developing states, to have the kind of conversation that we heard the emerging economies have earlier this morning. And so the emerging economies are talking about huge GDP balance sheets. They're talking about inclusion of nuclear energy, and they're talking about financing and concessional financing for their development. And we're talking about the scalability of large economies. But then you consider the small island developing states like Barbados. And you need to ensure that concessional financing takes into account the context that I have just outlined. The things that we're foregoing in order to do the right thing. The moral imperative of the right thing for 1.5 to stay alive, as Prime Minister Motley has said. That means that the financial institutions need to look at the outdated architecture that you have referred to, Mr. Moderator. It means that the financial institutions need to look at the tenor of their financing loans. They need to look at the de-risking strategies. One of the things that we are navigating is not the availability of financing. Financing is readily available. We have a plethora, perhaps a stampede, of independent power producers racing to Barbados to be able to invest in our renewable energy transition because the targets are so aggressive and the ambition is so high. But the de-risking mechanisms that are being used to make projects bankable by many of our development partners are not consistent with the realities of small island developing states. And there has to be a conversation about what are the appropriate risk strategies to be used to make projects bankable. What is an appropriate rate of return and over what time period to be able to match the 1.5 targets and to be able to match our climate targets? But it also has to account for the question of vulnerabilities in places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada that had storms in the Beryl last year that decimated entire economies. It has to take into account what happened in Bahamas several years ago and what happened in Antigua several years ago with Barbuda. And we have to be able to say, in one fell swoop, the climate crisis could wipe out entire economies. What does it cost us to be able to rebuild? And then finally, the point is this. Beryl affected St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it also affected Grenada and other countries in the region, but it affected Barbados as well. The insurance mechanisms that allow countries to rebuild did not allow Barbados to access the financing to rebuild our infrastructure to be able to continue with our march towards our 2030 targets because we were indirectly affected by a storm that directly hit other countries. There has to be a reform, and the imperative of now could not be more urgent for the Bridgetown Initiative and for the overall financial mechanisms to support the energy transition to take place for small island developing states. And that's really what we're talking about in terms of the Bridgetown Initiative and why it's so urgent and why 3.0 was launched in Azerbaijan just recently in the last COP. And we expect that on the way to Rio, we fully support Brazil, and we want to ensure that we are having a conversation that the entire international community hears us, understands us, has context for us, and is able to make the necessary changes that we absolutely need as small island developing states, and Barbados is committed to anchoring a lot of that charge along with all of you.
Thank you, Minister Cummins, for setting the groundwork, and perhaps where I may need to shift the conversation. And we know that financing matters, and finance is important in the renewable implementation within SIDS. But also the barriers to the access of finance is quite important. And so I'm changing the order of my questions now a little bit. I think it's important for us to bring the World Bank into the conversation at this particular time. So Fiji, I will come back to the question to you, but I actually want to turn to the World Bank now based on the intervention coming from Minister Cummins. So we're all too familiar with the SIDS story, and the Minister outlined our story and our challenges. We have small economies, we have lack of physical space, we have high debt burdens, in addition to being extremely vulnerable to climate shocks. And so SIDS require distinct financing. And so how is the World Bank engaging with SIDS to support us with our renewable energy deployment? And the Minister also touched on the issue of de-risking investments. And so we want to know, what are the de-risking investments that the World Bank is involved in, and how could those be adaptable to SIDS?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to say it's a particular pleasure to be in this panel. I come from a country where sea is very important. So whenever we work with the small island development states, it's always a special way. And to answer your question, I will take the opportunity of the fact that I'm here with the Minister from the Maldives and just very briefly tell you the story of how we started engaging the Maldives almost 10 years ago, back in 2014. And what happened there, and what are some of the lessons that we learned that we feel are applicable to other small island development states. And I think what is particular about this panel is that you look at the diversity of the islands and the diversity of the resources they have, from geothermal, hydropower, oil and gas, some of them, and then wind and solar. So small island development states are a group of countries, but when it comes to their energy profiles, can also be very different. So when we started working in the Maldives about in 2014, we started doing a very small project, about 1.5 megawatts of solar rooftops, because we know that space in the islands is a challenge. And we ran a process, a competitive process. We tried to do this with the private sector. We ran the bids, and we had, at the end of the day, only one bidder and a price that was about 23 cents, which was barely meeting the price that the country was paying through diesel. But that was in 2014. And then we came back to the process. We did some more analysis. And what we decided to do was two things. First of all, do larger projects, prepare them better, and we put in place guarantees. So we try to provide upfront, together with the bidding process, guarantees to the private sector on the repayment of the government's obligations. We enlarged the size of the projects, and what we also did is we used concessional climate financing to put batteries together with solar. And to cut a long story short, in the last round that we did of bids in the Maldives, the prices dropped from 23 cents to below 10 cents. And that makes a very big difference in a country that depends on diesel for their power generation, and where they need to send the diesel in remote islands where the maintenance of diesel engines is very complicated. So what has unlocked everything was that the government was very systematic and proactive in preparing the projects, that they ran transparent, competitive procedures. I think in the last round of bids, we had more than 20 or 30 different bidders coming into the Maldives and bidding for the projects. So over time, what happened is prices went down, and exponentially the interest of investors went up. So this is essentially the key. We need a government, and we have been supporting governments in preparing projects. My colleagues at the IFC are doing similar work now in Barbados for a wind project. So we need to prepare the projects, help governments to prepare the projects. Then what we can bring on the table is our de-risking instruments, guarantees of payments, and of course our own financing. I think one of the interesting things that we learned in the Maldives, and I know that we have been doing it in Papua New Guinea, is that at the end of the day, it's not just about bringing the private sector in to do the solar project, but we need to make sure that the network is good, that the network is resilient, and that we need to support those investments very often with public financing as well. So I think the right mixture of bringing climate concessional financing, de-risking instruments on the payments, making sure that there is a plan and that the network can absorb the power, the breakthroughs that we have recently on costs of clean energy, plus breakthroughs on batteries, this is what has allowed us to do a lot in the Maldives. We're working on another larger scale project with many development partners. And I think that this is the model that we feel is successful and can help bringing more clean energy investments around the islands. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps maybe I perhaps maybe want to pose another question to you, and I'll come back and maybe have you ponder on this question, because I don't necessarily think that as SIDS especially, and I'll give the case of Antigua and Barbuda, who is considered a high-income country, and the type of access that we need to the finance that would enable the transition to renewable. We need to hear concrete proposals on how the banks are allowing us to gain that type of access. So I need you to ponder on this question, and I'll return to you. But maybe we'll go to Fiji at this time, and Fiji's case is quite remarkable. We know that you've made remarkable progress in expanding your access to renewable energy, using hydropower and other mix of renewables. I think considering all the challenges that you're facing, and other states are facing, we often place emphasis on tailored solutions. So tell us, Honorable Minister, how is Fiji working to attract investment to accelerate the development and deployment of SIDS-specific renewable energy technologies? And maybe perhaps just to broaden the question a little bit more, is there a role for regional collaboration? And perhaps maybe, given the example that the World Bank is providing with that of Maldives, the type of international support that is needed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As already mentioned, Fiji currently has about 97% reach in terms of electricity. And in that, 53% is hydro. So that is, for us, is an achievement. And some of the targets we have include 100% electricity up to 2026. And also to have renewable energy, 100% renewable energy by 2036. As already mentioned, of course, there are challenges as we move forward. We at COP have been supporting the 1.5 threshold, and very important, the just transition. So that also includes, in terms of renewable energy moving forward, the investments which are needed. At the moment, investments in renewable energy is about $700 million, but moving forward, we'll need about $2 billion. We have various institutions which are working with the Fiji government, including ADB, European Investment, etc. But one of the key words which have not irritated, but sort of hindered us moving forward is the word bankable. So when we talk about, when we hear the word bankable, for a small island developing state, as already mentioned by my colleagues, there are specific hindrances within our countries which would hinder us moving towards bankable projects. For instance, when you talk about hydro, in Fiji, there have been partnerships with, in the past with the World Bank and also ADB. But given as we move forward, the data indicates, from climate change, the various variances in terms of dependence on hydro, in terms of the hydrology data. So just recently, our Fiji electricity company, the Energy Fiji Limited, they made a profit of about $50 million in 2022, but made a loss of $24 million in 2023 because of the low water levels at our hydro. So renewable energy, as we move forward, sure, we have hydro, but given the challenges of climate change, that has high risk. So I don't know how the banks and financial institutions see that, and also with the scientific data there in terms of climate change. And of course, like the other countries, we increasingly face the intensity of cyclones, floods, which impact on all these renewable energy options. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm being reminded that we have limited time, but I do want to remind the organizers that we started late, and this is critically important for SIDS. And so I do want to continue the conversation, but I do encourage my panelists to be more direct but also allow the conversation to continue. I want to turn my attention to Dr. Vince Henderson. And Dominica has been affected by a series of devastating climatic events in the last few years that has decimated your economy. The Honorable Minister from Fiji just spoke about bankable projects in itself. And we know that the word bankable sometimes could be a disincentive within SIDS in itself. We know that you have a 10 megawatt geothermal power project, which represents a major milestone with your energy transition. What lessons can be drawn from this innovative financing, and how can similar mechanisms and partnerships be scaled up across SIDS? So I want you to identify the challenges that you had, but also the opportunities that it presented to you, and perhaps we could continue this conversation on the financing needs.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, we have to place this in context. That is to say, the transition to renewable energy in SIDS. And the context that we have to always be reminded of is one, the vulnerability of SIDS, and two, we must talk about climate justice. I don't think we're having an honest conversation without putting those two to the fore of the discussion, or to, one would say, set the backdrop for any conversation that we're having. And the point that was made by Barbados, pursuant to our efforts with the Bridgetown Initiative, seeking to ensure that there's a restructuring of the international financial architecture, is key to that transition. And the whole notion that projects are bankable within SIDS that are vulnerable in a way that makes it more expensive is a real challenge. And I'm encouraged by the World Bank. We've been working with them for the last 10 years on the development of our geothermal energy project. But we have to go further. And there are small island developing states with the same vulnerability as those of us who qualify for either, by the way, because of our own circumstances. But there are countries like Barbados in the Caribbean, Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas. They do not qualify, but they face the same vulnerabilities as us. And for us in Dominica, what we found, the challenges that we've encountered, one, we embarked on geothermal energy development because of the abundance of the resource in the island. It is not cheap, it is not easy, but we felt that it was the most sustainable transition to renewable energy that we could pursue. And therefore, it took us a very long time to do that. But we found out that in addition to the complexities, that is to say the technical complexities, the high capital outlay that is required, we also found that in order to pursue geothermal energy, we had to get concessional financing and grants to reduce the risk. So we talk about de-risking a lot, but in order to de-risk, we had to get a combination of grants and very, very cheap money. But what we found is also the complexities pursuing the financing that are available, either through the World Bank and some of our partners. Now the GCF, we are now accessing GCF funds for the construction of the power plant, which we hope will be completed by the end of this year, so we can see power on the grid by early 2026. But the complexities, the rules, the requirements, the conditionalities that are placed, which again seem to forget the realities of the islands. So I find that those complexities and challenges, we can better address them when our partners really appreciate our own realities. So for example, you're negotiating with the international financial institutions, and they would make certain requirements or requests as if to say they were building the power plant in New Zealand or in Iceland. These are small island developing states, very small economies, very low, economic base. And therefore, some of the conditions that have been asked for, and we've proven that. And that's the other thing, because sometimes those institutions come to us as if to say we are blank slates. You know, we don't know anything. We don't have any views. And sometimes they think they have the solutions. I remember having, as negotiator for the government of Dominica, having to go through rounds of negotiation on things that made no sense then, and were proven in the end they made no sense. But the World Bank had to tick a box at some point, and somebody insisted that we had to do that. We pushed back, and we were successful, and I have to say that's why I like the new approach that the World Bank is taking. They eventually listen, but these are some of the challenges that we're faced with, and I'm hoping that, bearing in mind building resilience is more expensive than just building. Because we could do a transmission line as we are pursuing now for $40 million US for a small state, a small system. We could do that for 20. But we had to ensure that we factored in resilience, building on the ground, building sturdier systems above ground, and those are expensive. We found out it's 4 times the cost. And that's in mind. The international community, the partners, need to work with us to provide grants, concessional financing, and blended financing where possible. But unless we get that, this whole notion that we can just put in a few solar panels and connect them to some batteries and we're okay, that cannot be it. What happens when the next hurricane season comes?
Thank you, Minister. I think the big takeaway from your intervention, if these institutions and the international community deem us as being the most vulnerable, treat us as such, all right? Stop all the hindrance, provide tailored solutions to us. What works in large economies won't work within SIDS. How you access finance in large economies won't work within SIDS. Before we go to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, I perhaps want to come in with Papua New Guinea. So in the whole climate discussions and conversations, there's this innovative approach to financing and how SIDS and other vulnerable countries would access finance. financing, we know that the landmark agreement from COP29 on standards for centralized carbon market under Article 6.4 mechanism presents significant opportunities for diversifying climate finance for SIDS. Papua New Guinea is already leading the way in drafting guidelines for implementing Article 6.4 and preparing to engage with the global carbon market. Carbon market is gaining more and more global attention. In your view, how prepared are SIDS to navigate this emerging carbon trading landscape? Minister?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. Firstly, let me put into context PNG's challenges in the energy space. PNG generates 1.2 gigawatts for its energy generation for its country, and 72% is from fossil fuel, and 28% is from renewable energy. We have a plan to reach out to 70% to energize our country by 2030. Last year, we commissioned a hydro project for 50 megawatt, driven by the private sector, and this through a IPP arrangement. And this private sector company has contributed last year alone in 2023, contributed $100 million US dollars to the revenue of our national power company. And we see that there's potential in renewable energy in hydro, and we are now working on two of our big projects, which is Purari Hydro that can generate up to 1,800 megawatts, including a Karimui mega project, which can generate also 1,000 megawatts for our power needs. We want to replace our big mining companies that are using fossil fuel, and that is a way that we see. And we think that for us as a country, we need to accelerate more into hydro potential, and also we are also looking at the wind energy as well. We have a potential of up to about 100 gigawatts that we want to do in our coastlines. So coming back to the question on the carbon markets, all the SIDS countries, including Papua New Guinea, have challenges in terms of financial constraints and the capacity issues that we have. We are all unique in our own ways, especially in the Pacific Island countries. We are small, vulnerable states subject to weather patterns that are not so friendly. So we are very vulnerable, and we really want to participate in the carbon markets. For PNG, we put in the policy and the legislations in place, the regulations, the off-grid regulations in place. Our country, our government is contributing up to 1 megawatt for about five districts in our country for about $25 million US dollars. And we're also working with our partners. ADB, Australian government, is helping to put up about 1 megawatt solar farms in five different places. So we are collaborating with our partners, ADB, Australian government, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, in addressing this issue. So for Papua New Guinea, we see the carbon markets that are also important for us, given that we have a rich biodiversity and as well as the forestry sector that we can be able to tap into. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Final question to the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. Mr. Lee, given that 9 states are members of the AIIB, what specific programs or funding mechanisms has the AIIB implemented to address the unique challenges faced by SIDS? And maybe perhaps also for us to get a better appreciation of the work of the bank and what practical steps can SIDS take to better access and leverage these resources. But before you answer, Mr. Lee, I do want my panel members to think on, I'm giving you a 30 seconds opportunity both from the country perspective, but also from the institutions. We have in our presence member states or bilateral partners. We have multilateral institutions. We have the financial sectors. I do want you to focus on the 30-second intervention on what renewable energy means for your specific country and how the partners can support. And I do want the institutions also to respond in the type of support they can offer. But Mr. Lee, the original question to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I have to say I'm very pleased to be part of this panel. And answering your question, we are the same as other MDBs, like World Bank, ADB, IFC. So the definition and of this climate financing and clean energy are almost the same. We share many platforms, and we work together very closely. So I don't think there's not much difference in terms of defining this. First of all, I'm sure you already heard from my colleagues that a lot of mentioning World Bank, IFC, EBRD, ADB, but I'd like to give you a quick, kind of intro that, most of them may not be familiar with the AIB. We are just a 10-year-old bank, which is very still new. We are based in Beijing, about 600 colleagues, and we have only one overseas office, which is in fact in Abu Dhabi. And but we still have 110 member country. Out of that is 10 SID members. And we've done like only 7 projects so far. Most of them are sovereign-backed financing. Because we are the Asian-focused bank, naturally we are focusing South Pacific, the region in this definition. I'd like to give you 3, 4, because I know we are running out of time. We'll give a very brief introduction what kind of instrument we can work the work with the governments of these SID members. Before I joined the President Office, I used to in charge of private sector investment and financing for AIB for about 8 years. So I've done some projects on this. And besides, we have a 50% target in private sector development, private sector financing. So that also applies these SIDs. First of all, some of the participants already mentioned this Lighthouses initiative. In fact, AIB participated in last June. So this is, I don't need to explain this further on this. The second one is, I'm sure the World Bank colleague is also very familiar. We also adopted the climate-focused policy-based financing, which is, I think, is a very good initiative. Of course, this is still on the public sector financing side. The reason this is important is to support the government-led policy and institutional reform program aimed at scaling up climate financing and accelerating the country's transition towards a new low carbon and the climate resilient future. I think this will be a very interesting instrument for SIDs because this is very flexible and adaptable to meet the diverse government needs and the circumstances and the priorities. In fact, AIB, we are maintaining the special funds and the MCDF, which is financing especially for project, the preparation concessional area. Next one is so-called branded financing, which is a very important piece. AIB is focusing on these days. And this is, by definition, is a combination of a traditional financing plus concessional ones. So I think this is an important instrument to attract more capital, especially from the private sector. And this is very adaptive to the private sector projects. The final one is I think is because we are dealing with relatively small and we have some capacity and scale issue, the project side, and sometimes it's a credit issue. So we like to see some kind of combined platform with a regional platform, which is not so kind of portfolio diversified approach in terms of accessing this much needed capital to the region. Thank you. I'll stop here. I think I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And we are really running out of time. And I do want to stick to the 30 seconds that I'm allotting each panel member. And so I will start with the Honorable Minister from Fiji.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Okay, just a quick one on in terms of what renewable energy means to Fiji and keeping to our targets. Of course, on a global scale, we need to contribute to the issues regarding climate change, given the impact on our country, small island developing state. And we need to, first, it's important to reduce the cost of fossil fuel imports, which is very high. It's about 20% of our total cost of imports. And of course, finally, our rural communities, we need to uplift them in terms of development. And that's where renewable energy comes in. And we'd like to intensify that moving forward. School children, women, youths, and level out the development from the urban areas to the rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, comments? What does renewable energy mean for Barbados, and how you need to leverage the support from the international community?
At this point, I think we've already spoken about Barbados' ambitions nationally, but I think that certainly for the small island developing states in the region, the broader question of renewable energy now needs to take into consideration whether or not there's an opportunity for us going forward, having met or are in the process of meeting our own national targets, to look at our energy market integration and the process of whether or not there is an opportunity for us from Antigua all the way down to Trinidad and Tobago and everything in between and on the side to be able to create an energy market driven by renewables in the same way that other continental countries have done and other islands and in other regions have done in the Asia-Pacific region, to see how we can mitigate our own vulnerabilities in the face of challenges that we're experiencing in terms of external partners.
Mr. Henderson?
Yeah. I totally agree. I just want to add on to what Lisa said. Clearly, we need to interconnect the Caribbean region. We have the potential for great energy, geothermal potential in a number of member states. There could be wind, solar. We need to integrate the entire chain of islands in the Caribbean. For us in Dominica, by 2026, we will be about 85% in renewables. The other 15%, we need to reach that by investing more in transmission network and enhancing the grid. But for us, pursuing geothermal energy, although expensive, as I said, we have been able to forge partnerships, work with our international development agencies to ensure that we can reduce the cost to the consumers. So what we're pursuing is also a reduction in the cost of electricity, and that can help to set the stage for further development. And we're hoping that with more efforts by our partners on SIDS-appropriate technology, geothermal, ocean, especially OTEC, wave and tidal, we need to emphasize the investments need to be made in developing those technologies within our islands, not taken from somewhere else and brought to us, but to do the work in these island states so that we, in fact, can have more SIDS-appropriate technology applied in our respective countries.
Thank you. Minister Abraham.
Thank you. The renewable energy, investing in renewable energy for Maldives means that if we have more private partnerships, private sector involvement, so that we can actually have eliminate the need for capital from the government on investment, so that we can use that funds for other socio-economic development. So we wanted to have more private sector involvement through the assistance from the multilateral banks like the World Bank, so that there are cases like to tariff buy-down methods and other guarantee mechanisms. If we can still increase this kind of guarantee mechanisms and increase the private sector investments, then we will be able to invest more and then save more from the government budgetary inputs and then constraints, so that we can have more funds available for our socio-economic projects. Yeah, thank you.
Minister Upar?
For Papua New Guinea, our government, through our Prime Minister, has announced a partial privatization of power company. They make around 93% from the grid, and 93% from the grid, and the other 7% is generated from off grid. So what we want to do is offload all the non-profitable to smaller private companies. And as energy minister in my country, we've given up to 10 licenses to the private sector to come and look at smaller projects in the energy space or the renewable energy space, including solar in the short term and hydro in the long term, including wind energy and geothermal as well. So those are the directions that we are doing in the renewable space. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So to end our conversation to both the multilateral financial institutions, you've heard the countries where they are in their renewable energy ambitions, where they need to go, and the type of support that is needed. What are the banks prepared to do?
So, first of all, let me say that on the part of the World Bank, we are very committed to continue to support small island development states. Our rules and procedures allow us to do more with our financing for small island development states. Now, is this enough? Unfortunately not. And I agree with the panelists when they argued that small island development states deserve to have more concessional financing and more climate financing because they have vulnerabilities, and in a way, the world owes more to small island development states, and this is something I think that we believe as well. Now, what really is where we can add value is how we can take the limited concessionality, the limited climate financing that is available, and really try to find ways to leverage it so that we can bring private sector capital and more commercial capital for investments. Because the reality is that we are not going to have enough public financing, we're not going to have enough multilateral development financing. So I think this is the way we think about it. And the last point is, and I was very happy to hear your question about Article 6. We are now coming to a decade after the Paris Agreement, and in terms of creating carbon credits for clean energy investments, we are basically nowhere. And I think starting with unlocking carbon credits and provide more climate financing for the clean energy transition for small island development states is something that is a good starting point. We just had the earlier conversation with officials of the government of Brazil that are taking up on CAP 30 and the efforts that we're doing on our planning. And my feeling is that we need to focus more of our efforts on how we do that and how do we unlock carbon credits for clean energy investments in small island development states so that we can help with more concessionality and covering the higher marginal cost, the higher resilience costs that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee. No further comments. Okay, great. All right, we've come to the end of our panel discussion. Clearly, it was a rich discussion. I wish we had more time to dive further into the issues, but I'm sure we'll have additional opportunities. So I thank my panel members for joining us today and having this very, very rich and frank discussion. We will stand for the traditional photo op, and then I will hand the floor over to Gobers to continue the next session.
Well done.
Thank you. If you could probably just come a little bit closer.
All right. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we'll straight moving to the second part of our panel discussion. And while our the second part of the discussions will focus on another important dimension of renewable deployment in the SIDS context, which is about technology. And while we are talking about the SIDS appropriate technologies, and some of the member panelists in the previous segment already spoke about some of the options, but we will also look into the local capabilities and skills available to be able to take those discussions, take the deployment ambitions to reality. In this session, I have a very distinguished lineup of panelists again, similar to the first discussion. And now I will invite our panelists, ministers and representatives of development organizations to the stage. Let me start with Honorable Melfred Nicholas, Minister of Information, Communication, Technologies, Utilities and Energy, Antigua Barbuda. Honorable Tikewa Tarati, Minister of Infrastructure and Sustainable Energy, Kiribati. His Excellency Mr. Frederick Wisseling, Energy Envoy of Kingdom of Netherlands. Her Excellency Mrs. Betty Soto, Vice Minister of Innovation and Energy Transition at the Ministry of Energy and Mines of Dominican Republic. Then Mr. Riyad Medeh, Director, Sustainable Energy Hub at UNDP. Ms. Elina Akinaga, Secretary at the Department of Resources and Development, Micronesia. And the last but not the least, Ms. Abaka Anjan Madison, Deputy Chief Secretary from the Republic of Marshall Islands. So I will start our panel discussion. Obviously, we are late with our schedule, and I would very much appreciate our panelists to limit their contributions with 3-4 minutes. And let me start with Honorable Minister Melfred Nicholas. Antigua Barbuda has been a great host of the successful SIDS4 conference earlier last year, and which also witnessed the launch of two important initiatives for the SIDS. One is the SIDS Center of Excellence, and also the SIDS Global Data Hub. And given the focus of our discussion on technology, research and deployment, but also how to develop capacities in the islands that, as we know, that they are not at the level desired. How do you think these two initiatives contribute to these two ambitions, two targets that we want to achieve with SIDS?
Yes, with respect to the whole setup of the Center of Excellence and the derivatives that have come from the Center of Excellence, I believe that the way that the framework was set up, it recognizes that the small island developing states would wish to pursue this renewable energy objectives, but recognizing too that there are certain constraints that small island developing states have, specifically with respect to inbuilt capacity and, of course, access to technology. So the framework for the Center of Excellence and the Data Hub envisages a situation where we are going to be able to accelerate the learning within SIDS microstates to be able to learn from each other's experiences and to adopt common practices. But moreover, to ensure that whatever experiences are achieved in specific countries, and we have had some insights based on the previous panel that was here, we recognize that individual states have pursued certain initiatives. It is to gather that information and to use that information and that platform to inform the oncoming SIDS in terms of if you are pursuing a similar initiative, you're not starting from ground zero, but you have a framework from which to start. And I think that that is an important development for the work that we have to do in the coming years.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, launching the initiative is one thing, and making it operational and making it long-term sustainable in terms of its service and support is another issue. And how do you think? What are the resources? What are the requirements? Do you think in order to make it operational and also long-term sustainable?
Well, clearly, in terms of the infrastructure build-out, one of the areas that clearly presents a challenge for us would be in the area of grid stability. These are some of the areas in terms of access to the emerging technologies with respect to everyone is challenged with respect to having enough storage, and how do we get around these challenge in terms of access to the markets for these particular products. And these represent particular challenges for SIDS. And of course, the framework in this environment envisages a situation where, from a technology standpoint, it is leveraging the access to specific technologies that are existing in, let's say, developed markets. And that the SIDS framework can allow, not the SIDS framework, sorry, the Center of Excellence will allow the SIDS to be able to tap into these networks of resources and to then transfer the technology within country to be able to benefit from those developments.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let me turn to the Pacific and to Honorable Minister Tarati from Kiribati. And especially I want to ask you about the Kiribati Integrated Energy Roadmap. And because it was, I think 2025 is the year that from 2017 to 2025, that was the years of implementation. And so far, how do you see was it successful? And what are the key elements that you have focused on that strategy, and how successful you have been?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Just before I start on, I take this opportunity to thank Arena for having me on this panel discussion. Well, at the outset, just let me introduce a little bit about my country. As similar to my colleague, islands in the Pacific, Kiribati is a small island in the middle of the Pacific, with 130 population, 130,000 population. With the islands scattered in the Pacific, we have 33 coral islands, Atokalo Islands, with the highest island is not more than 3 meters above the sea level. So in 2017 and 2025, maybe prior to that, we have developed a roadmap, integrated roadmap, energy roadmap that was developed by the Arena from the assistance of from the request from our country, and on that roadmap, we aim to target to try to trace 2 goals, to how to transit to renewable energy. And one of that we're trying to target is the urban area and the rural areas. The rural area, we have 2 rural areas in Tarawa, in Kiribati. We have the capital island of Tarawa and another island in Kiribati in the far east of the country, about 3,000 kilometers away from the main capital. And we try to introduce, as of now, we have the national power company that's distributing energy to the household in the urban area. And this is powered by diesel fuel. As said now, we have around 10% of that power generation source from the renewable energy, especially the solar energy. In the South Islands, where we call it the rural areas, we anticipate to have renewable energy powering the islands by 60 to 70% by 2025. It was unfortunate all our targets were made impossible due to some circumstances that are beyond our reach. But however, we have managed to achieve some of the project. As of now, we have, with the assistance of the World Bank and the ADB and other development partners, we managed now to have the installed the power grid that's will give us about 4.5 megawatts. That's once completed and functional in late in 2027 or late 2026, we might expect about 50 to 60% of the power generation from the renewable energy. So looking at the islands, the rural areas, where we have most about 20 islands that's away from the main capital island, we've been installing some of the standalone solar PV that's providing electricity to the boarding schools and the remote islets, and the smaller solar power. It was donated by one of our development partners, the BRC. We're equipping the household with the small power of about around 200 to 300 watts that can only provide electricity for their basic needs appliances like the lights and the fan. And we've been covering around 70% of the household throughout the islands in the rural area. So we have more in our work plan with the other assistance of some development partners to equip and put more solar power in the islands. Solar is our only means of renewable energy. As you know, the location of our island is right below the equator, where the sunlight is our resource from January all the year round. We have only one season, the summer, no other season. So we are very rich of sunlight. So how can we utilize this resource? We need hands. We need hands to help us move forward. And we thank you. We thank Irina for giving us a lot of effort now to help us with our roadmap, where we can steer our strategies forward, where we're gonna reach our destination, and especially with the assistance of our other development, Australia, New Zealand, PRC, and other countries that keep helping us as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me turn to Mr. Wisselink. The Dutch government has been supporting the energy transition efforts in the Dutch territories in the Caribbean, in Curaçao, Aruba, and San Martin. And can you tell us what is the programs that you have been implementing to facilitate it, and especially focus on how you're developing capacities, local capacities in those countries to implement those programs, and if you can just tell us the key elements of those programs that support these more accelerated efforts in the islands.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. The Netherlands is in two ways connected to the SIDS. First, as you already mentioned, some of the SIDS islands are actually part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But secondly, even importantly, the history of the Netherlands is tied up with water. And some of you might know a large part of the Netherlands is actually below sea level. So even though the Netherlands is not an island, we are very, very vulnerable to the rising sea levels ourselves. And throughout history, we have, a strong relationship with water. We learned to live with the water, and we developed expertise in water management, building dikes, protect our country from water, and even build cities on water. So, and secondly, we use our sea for renewable energy, of course, large-scale offshore wind and floating solar and tidal energy, etc. And what we want is to use this expertise for that we have built for the SIDS islands to support them in managing the rising sea levels and making actually the energy transition work. So we have strong commitment to support Curaçao, Aruba, and Sint Maarten in their energy transition. And we do this, amongst other things, through our National Growth Fund. And this fund provides capital to fund sustainable energy projects on the spot. And we collaborate also to our Kingdom climate agenda. And this agenda defines strategic areas of collaboration in the Caribbean part of our Kingdom. And this is really targeted to support energy transition in our islands. And moreover, we have specific targeted subsidy schemes available for sustainable and renewable energy projects. And in this way, we have also organized the Caribbean Climate and Energy Conference. In May this year, there will be a second Climate and Energy Caribbean Conference at the islands of Curaçao, open for all Caribbean countries. And what we want there is that all stakeholders involved in the Caribbean region to have concrete and urgent action to develop the transition to resilient and sustainable energy for all the islands in the Caribbean region. That's for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there certain lessons that you may want to share with other countries, other SIDS in the region, in the Caribbean, or more broadly in the SIDS context?
Well, we at the first conference in 2023, we have shared a lot of projects and experiences in our region. Well, there are several concrete projects. We have solar projects in Aruba and Sint Maarten and Curaçao. We are trying to see if offshore wind is also an option for our islands. Floating solar is a concrete option as well. So we are in that stage of defining concrete solutions for the islands, not only for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, but also for the whole region.
Thank you. Let me turn to Dominican Republic, which is making significant strides in the energy transition in recent years. Her Excellency, Mrs. Betty Soto. You have the target already set for this year, 25% of renewables and 30% by 2030. My first question is, are you on track to achieve those targets you set? And the second part is, I think you have been supporting this implementation also with additional measures, investing in grids and regulatory reforms, focus on rural electrification to achieve energy access. So it's a kind of a very comprehensive engagement. And if you can also tell us about the key elements of this success. I mean, what has been done correctly, and also some of the challenges you might have faced throughout that road.
Well, thank you very much. As you mentioned, we already have in our national energy plan the goal to achieve the 25% of renewable for this year, 2025, and the 30% by 2030. Well, I can say that we're going well, but we can do better. And definitely, as you mentioned, we have identified some several challenges that we have to work on to reach the goal to the 30% on 2030. For this year, it's almost for sure that we're gonna reach the 25% because of the projections that we have done with the actual projects that are developing in the national territory. But let me pass to the lessons that we have learned, the good things that we think we are doing that are part of this successful energy transition. This leadership role in renewable energy that the Dominican Republic is playing in the region is primarily due to cooperation among key stakeholders, both national and international. At the national level, transparency and the streamlining of administrative process for obtaining the permits and the power share agreements have allowed investment for the development of renewable energy projects to flow successfully. That's one of the key I think, strategies that we have implemented. We also have a robust regulatory framework and determination to make the necessary adjustments to adopt the new market trends and ensure legal security. Have also played a significant role throughout this process. In the case of financial, we have establishing clear regulatory frameworks and financial incentives that have encouraged investment in renewable technologies. I can mention, for example, feed-in tariff, tax incentives for renewable energy projects, and a streamlined permitting process that make it easier for companies to enter to the market. International cooperation, I have to mention that have also been crucial in this area. The best example of this is the implementation of the Energy Transition Project, promotion of renewable energy to implement climate goals in the Dominican Republic that is financed by the German corporation through GIC. And this project definitely has enabled multiple initiatives such as studies, programs, and capacity building efforts, allowing us as a country to understand and replicate the best practices to promote the deployment of renewable energy in the country. I think for now it does.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to bring in an international development partner, UNDP, to the discussion, which has been pretty active in the SIDS context for a long time. And you, Riyad, has been personally engaged and has been supporting these efforts from the UNDP side. But tell us the international partner perspective. Where do you think they can be more useful, most useful in terms of advancing the SIDS agenda for energy transition? Obviously, I mean, we have discussed in the previous panel a lot about finance, but there is definitely need for innovation in finance because whatever we do right now, it is not sufficient. So things have to change. So where do you see these innovative approaches from the UNDP side to be able to deploy larger sums of renewables in islands?
Thank you very much, Gerbus, and it's a real pleasure to be here with my other panelists. So let me give you one or two numbers which are very important in the context of the small island developing states. First of all, since they face a unique challenge with 90% of dependence on fuel import, an exceptionally high electricity tariff, 2 to 3 times than the global average. This is the reality. This is what they are facing. And the importance of this vulnerability need to be taken into account. It is not the same reality than other countries. But one element which is very important here to be able to unlock the full potential of energy transition in the next 5 years, we need to focus on 3 critical areas. The first one, and as you mentioned, it was on the finance part, is how can we mobilize innovative financing for the just energy transition? The reality that the SIDS require, and based on what we heard previously, $5.9 billion annually to achieve their renewable energy goals by 2030. nearly $6 billion by 2030. While the ambitious, this transition could save $3.3 billion annually, 3.3% of the GDP. How much of percentage of climate finance SIDS are able to attract? 1%. 1%. That is the reality. Innovative financing are critical to overcome those barriers. And this is where UNDP and other organizations are working together, for example, for developing the first swap energy for the SIDS. The second element, which is taking into account the multidimensional vulnerability index, which was adopted last year, which was a great battle from the presidency of AOSIS from Antigua and Barbuda. One element that if you take into account the multidimensional vulnerability index for the SIDS to be able to finance the energy transition, the SIDS will globally save 1.5% of GDP. This is completely different than the usual way of approaching finance. Because it takes into account the reality, the majority of the SIDS are middle-income countries and high-income countries and have difficulties to have access to concessional financing. Taking into account one element like the MVI is one of the clear solutions. Green bond, also innovation financing solution for laboratory that we are developing in Cuba, blended finance in some SIDS is also a good success. In the case of Antigua and Barbuda, it is making an impressive progress, aiming 100% renewable by 2030, which will save the country 60 million annually in reducing on the fossil fuel import. And what was said previously, which for me very important, the expertise exists in the SIDS. They know what they want, they have their clear target, they want to partner with actors that can support them and take into account the reality of their vulnerability, but also the potential of the investment of opportunities in renewable energy in the SIDS. The second element after financing is how we can strengthen the capacity and promoting SIDS cooperation. And the Center of Excellence, which was agreed during the fourth conference of the Small Island Developing State in Antigua Barbuda, is one of the elements which is as important than what UNDP is doing by developing the platform of SIDS cooperation, building the capacity. I was discussing with my friend, the Minister Tariq from Maldives, when he said, Riyadh, we're going to have the Pacific Island Conference in the forthcoming month. I want to come and share my experience with them. I want to share the experience of Maldives, the success of Maldives in some areas, and I'm sure that I can learn from them on that areas. And this is another element which is as essential. The third element is how we can drive digital transformation, IoT, to enable smart energy system. And in this case, we have developed with users the SIDS data platform that comprise more than 6,000 indicators, GIS indicators, where you can see your country and identify investment potential in renewable energy. This kind of instrument with an AI analysis, which is live, there are no other group of countries that have that. And we cannot say for private sector that data do not exist in SIDS. 6,000 indicators from all the small island developing states. Another initiative which is very interesting is the Cloud Solar in Barbados, which are de-risking investment in solar energy by allowing individuals to purchase and invest in solar panels, democratizing access to clean energy. Private sector, public sector, development partners, 3 levels where we can really focus. So reducing the emission is about empowering communities, creating jobs, and building resilience against climate shock. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Riyadh. Ms. Akinaga, Let me take this finance gap question or the point from Riyadh and ask you, to what extent this finance gap can be covered by climate finance? To what extent do you think, from Micronesia perspective, the COP29 produced climate finance to the satisfaction of small islands?
Okay, thank you for the question. I'd also like to thank Irina for the opportunity to be part of this panel. To put things in perspective, let me talk a little bit about Micronesia. So for Micronesia, it is an island made up of 607 islands, or a country made up of 607 islands and scattered across the vast ocean, which is equivalent to the size of mainland China. So just the geographical layout of FSM itself, it's already a challenge. The current targets for energy for Micronesia is by 2030, we hope to reach or increase our renewable energy by 70%. In addition to increasing our renewable energy by 70%, we also hope to have 100% access to energy for all households in the country. And as I said, just that geographical layout is already a challenge. So financing is a really big deal, not just for Micronesia, but for small island developing states. So although it is an ambitious goal, it is a dream. And I say a dream because external funds can take us to that 2030 expectation. So in reference to your question, the results of the COP29 in Baku is indeed a leap in progress towards securing important funding for climate finance. The goal to triple yearly climate funding and reach over $1 trillion annually is commendable. However, the absence of specific funding for small island developing states and least developed countries is a significant issue that needs to be addressed. For SIDS like Micronesia, our vulnerabilities to climate change are disproportionately high. We face existential threats without having substantially contributed to the problem. Yet gaining access to climate funding continues to be a major obstacle for us in implementing effective strategies to deal with climate change. To fully leverage these new climate finance commitments, Micronesia calls on the global community to create dedicated funding streams within this ambitious financial framework, specifically for small island developing states and least developed countries. This would allow us to directly benefit from the resource necessary to advance our climate and energy goals. And what I mean by that, with targeted funding, it will enable us not only to adapt, but to also respond to our unique challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Marshall Islands, Ms. Anjan Madison. Marshall Islands has very ambitious climate and energy transition plans, net zero and 100% renewables by 2050. And what is Marshall Islands' strategy to achieve it? What are the key elements around within that? And also, I mean, I will also allow other ministers and panelists to come in if they wish, especially on the one point that we haven't discussed extensively, which is the infrastructure and grids and flexibility needed to achieve high ambitions in that context. And if you're able to capture that point also in your answer, that will be great. But what are the key elements to achieve this high ambition?
Thank you. I'm very honored to given the opportunity to be part of this panel. Given the history and geographical location, history and being an atoll nation, the tripling impact concept is not new to us. It's not new in a sense that we have to scale up efforts to ensure our islands are environmentally secure. And please allow me to elaborate. Like other Pacific island nations, islanders, Marshallese are seafarers, to be able to navigate the vast Pacific Ocean. Our ancestors knew about renewable energy and they knew how to utilize it. They knew how to harness the wind and how to use it. As a matter of fact, one of our legends is linked to the concept of clean energy. Lekanangir was a mother of 12 sons. To determine who will be the next high chief, they have to go through a race across the lagoon to determine who will be the next chief. During the race, or before the race, Lekanangir sat on the beach and politely asked her son one by one if they could give her a ride. The youngest son was the only one responded positively and take her on to ride with him. When he did, she opened her bag and pulled out a mat. And the mat is a way of harnessing the wind. And that's how the youngest son won the race and became the high chief. This Marshallese legend or myth, as one might say, is an illustration that we have always been mindful and aware of our surroundings. We have always been aware of the concept of renewable energy and use it to our advantage. So the concept of tripling impact of renewables is not new to the RMI. In fact, the RMI has shown its commitment to its renewable energy targets in many ways. Our commitment is highlighted through our NDCs, the Tile 2050 strategy, the RMI electrical roadmap, and the RMI national energy policy are among the several policies commitments that RMI has developed to showcase our efforts to our renewable energy targets. If we are committed to tripling our renewable energy efforts, we also have to be committed to collaboration with one another. As the saying goes, no man is an island. The RMI cannot meet its renewable target by itself. We need collaborative efforts from our development partners such as IRENA. Yesterday, when I delivered our country statement, I highlighted that one of RMI's greatest assets is its people. And to ensure we achieve our renewable energy targets and sustain clean energy, we need to build our people. We need more capacity building opportunities that is developed to serve and address our challenges in the islands. There is a Marshallese word, kajur. Kajur can mean sun, fuel, or anything that produces power. It can also mean unity. In fact, where I am from, which is Ibay, our utility is named Kajur. But its name is not derived from the concept of energy, from engine generators or other equipment that produces energy. The name came from the idea of collaboration. Unity. Marshallese believe that when people unite, mountains can be moved. Kajur what war? Kajur what war? Collaboration, that is. So, we need to work together to see through our goals. The RMI cannot do it alone. Thank you, and Komol Tata.
Thank you very much, Visajan Madison. And with these good words, let's close the panel. I really wanted to have a brief conversation on the grids, but it seems that we are already exceeded our time. We'll need to close the session. But the good thing is our next gathering of the ministers is already planned for during the SE4All forum in Barbados in March. So we are looking forward to, hopefully, I will definitely make sure that grid question will be there when we have the discussion next time. So thank you very much. Let's give a big applause to our panelists, please. And before I hand over the floor to for closing remarks, we would like to have you for a picture here for a moment. Thank you very much. So we close the session at this point. Thank you very much.